So today is a great feast day, the Feast of the Exaltation of the Holy Cross. This is a feast day that's always on September 14th. So when Sunday is September 14th, then we all celebrate it together on the weekend. Next year, whatever day of the week September 14th will be, that's when we'll celebrate it again. So sometimes it's on Sunday like this year. And so it's good for us. The cross is our symbol. We have other symbols, many other symbols, but of course, the cross is the one. In it is contained the love of God for the world and the victory and power of Jesus. We use it to signify so much, but we use it to signify the whole great work of God to save humanity. And we see it so often, we talk about the cross so often, we wear it. We contain so much in this one symbol and one word that we can kind of lose it. It can be actually in some ways too clean, in other ways too heavy. So what we want to do is just pull it apart a little bit, because when we understand the depth of what we mean by the cross, it can help us. It can help us like every single day. So that's what we're going to do. So to do this, I want to give you this little quotation. So I have a picture here. I'm not usually a props guy, but probably most of you, this might be too small for you to see. But this is a little prayer. It's the third antiphon from morning prayer today in the Liturgy of the Hours. So that's the daily prayer of the church that priests and deacons and men and women religious pray every day. But I have this because I've always loved this antiphon. And I asked my sister to make this. My siblings are all really talented. But I asked my sister to make this, and then I used it as one side of my ordination invitation card. So I don't really have a place to put this either, and I'm not going to hold it the whole time. But I will hold it up while I read this. Here's what it says. How radiant is that precious cross which brought us our salvation. In the cross we are victorious. Through the cross we shall reign. By the cross all evil is destroyed. Alleluia. So by itself we can say, yes, I believe that. That's good news. It's beautiful. But let's open up what we mean by the cross a little bit. We're just going to look at two levels here. There are probably many more, but we want to look at it from these two perspectives. The first one is just an external description, like a physical kind of description of what we mean by the cross. And then the second one is the interior or hidden reality of it, what's actually happening on the cross. So when we go to the cross of Jesus, his crucifixion and death, on this first level, that of just describing what is physical, what is visible, what's external, what we find there actually is something hopeless. We find shame, humiliation, ridicule, degradation, execution of an innocent man, violence, torture, pain, suffering, tears, sweat, bruises, and blood pouring out, rejection and abandonment and betrayal, sin, our own sin, and darkness and guilt, and death and failure and defeat. When you look at the cross of Jesus, just as it is, and try to describe what is externally visible, this is what we find. And it's brutal. But then, of course, what is actually happening on the cross of Jesus? What is Jesus doing? Why is the cross the sign of our salvation? This is the interior and hidden reality of it. What we see on the cross of Jesus, yes, all those things that I just described, but we see love that is stronger than death. Love that goes to death, through death, past death, all the way to the end. We see on the cross the total gift of himself, Jesus emptying himself entirely until there is nothing left. No breath, no drop of blood, nothing. We see Jesus laying down his life for others. We see patience in suffering, obedience to his Father, trust in God, surrender to Him. We see the sacrifice of love that saves the world. We see forgiveness and salvation and freedom and power, radiant light, life, victory, and glory. So the cross has these two sides, these two dimensions, and they're both true. And this is why the cross is such a strange and wonderful thing. So to try to drive this point home, the comparison and the difference and how actually they're one thing, we're just going to take the phrase that we read on here, and I'm just going to substitute the words, okay? Because, like I said, we're so handy with the word cross. We throw it around, we say it, and we can kind of lose its depth of meaning. So in the places where this antiphon said cross, I'm just going to replace it with something that we just mentioned. If we read this, swap out the words from that first level, the external description of what's going on the cross, then it might read something like this. How radiant is that precious execution which brought us our salvation. In suffering we are victorious, through death we shall reign. By His blood all evil is destroyed. Alleluia. All of this is technically true, but when we hear that, all of a sudden we say, I'm not so sure. Through death we shall reign. I'm okay with reigning through the cross. Now we'll do the same thing, but with the second level, with the interior and hidden reality of what is happening there. Well, what do we mean by cross? How radiant is that precious sacrifice of love to God which brought us our salvation. In trust and surrender we are victorious. Through suffering love we shall reign. By forgiveness all evil is destroyed. Alleluia. You see then how contradictory, how strange and mysterious is the cross that we venerate in love as the sign of Jesus, as the sign of redemption and His victory, as the sign of our faith. When you receive a blessing, it's usually made with the sign of the cross. Both of these things have to be tied up in our understanding of this. Back in the time when Jesus died, people did not make crosses out of gold and wear them around their necks. This is sort of one of the points that I'm trying to make. All they could see is that first level, all the horrendous darkness of the cross. So to make the sign of the cross over someone would most likely look like a curse, actually. Like a noose or something like this. It's something disgusting. And because of Jesus, everything is different, so that the sign that was so shameful, humiliating, and brutal, now for us, when we receive the sign of the cross, all we see is life and love and blessing and flourishing and glory. When we receive the sign of the cross, we receive hope. We know God's love for us. So again, can you see how strange this is, that the way, the sign, the gesture that God communicates His victory and His love for you is through the cross. Here's just one other example from the lives of the saints. Saint Jean de Brebeuf was one of the Jesuit missionaries to North America who died as a martyr. And when he was captured, when he was tortured, eventually, what they did, because always they were trying to ridicule him, so they imitated and made fun of baptism by pouring boiling water over his head and body. But then they ridiculed the cross of Jesus, and this is like this is an old story, actually. Here's a little aside. Did you know, one of the earliest signs of Christianity actually is found in a piece of ancient graffiti in Rome, where to ridicule Christians, it's an amazing thing. You can look it up online. But it's a piece of graffiti carved into a wall. It's a man on a cross whose head is shaped like a donkey's head. And it's just there to ridicule Christians who worship the crucified one, because it's so ridiculous. So first, to go back to St. John de Brebeuf, who was much more recent, when he was nearing the end of his life, when they were preparing to kill him to make fun of the crucifixion. They also had a big beam of wood, which they were going to tie him to. And what happened was, when he realized what was happening, when he met this piece of wood, this thick tree, and realized this would be the cause of his death, he embraced it and kissed it. And those who intended to kill him were so angry, so infuriated, they didn't actually go through with their plan. They just killed him on the spot because they couldn't wait anymore. Because what St. John de Brebeuf met in this wooden beam is what we meet in the cross. You see how in the cross of Jesus everything is changed. Because of the cross, what was ugly becomes beautiful. What was death becomes life. What was defeat is victory. When we encounter the cross, we encounter Jesus and his power. So that when we come to the cross, in whatever shape or form, when we come to anything that resembles that first level of understanding what the cross means, any kind of mistreatment, suffering, or pain, any kind of ridicule or abandonment, anything that you have ever been through or could imagine, when we come to those things, we meet the cross, which means we meet Jesus. And having met the cross now, what is at our disposal is the power of Jesus. And if we take this up, then anytime we meet the cross, which are usually the worst of days, anytime we meet the cross, then we say, today was a day of victory. Today was a day of glory, of love and life. Here's just one very simple example. When someone does something to you, treats you badly, something inexcusable, whether it's something small or something very grave and harmful, when they have done something wrong to you, then now, okay, we have encountered the cross. And when you and I die by forgiving that person what they have done, then we can look back and say, today was a day of victory. Jesus said, we have to deny ourselves, take up your cross daily, and follow him. And there are sort of little passing crosses that happen in our circumstances or with the people that we're with, but mostly the most difficult, the most painful, and the most permanent is the cross that is me, or the cross that is you. The things about yourself, about your life, about your health, about your mind, about your heart, that make us hopeless, defeated, that can be so heavy and painful. When we meet this is not the obstacle. This is the way to life. When we meet any kind of suffering, what we meet is the cross. And when we meet the cross, we meet Jesus and his power. And that means that when we meet any kind of suffering, what is at our disposal is all of those things involved in the cross. Glory and power and life that is stronger than death and love that is stronger than sin. So with all this, having pulled this apart a little bit and seeing more deeply into what we mean when we say the cross or when we make a picture of the cross, like its depth and breadth and glory, I'll read the Antiphon one more time, and I think you'll hear it differently than before. How radiant is that precious cross which brought us our salvation. In the cross we are victorious. Through the cross we shall reign. By the cross all evil is destroyed. Alleluia.